Good day, grade 11 students. This is Miss Mayani. Love and share Christ. Let's enjoy the learning activities for today. Communication is central in how we live. But did you ever wonder how communication takes place? Today, we will be discussing the different models of communication. But before we proceed, let us first recall the definition of communication. Communication is the process of expressing and exchanging information, thoughts, ideas, and feelings. Since communication is a process, it involves a series of actions that lead to a particular result, such as the passing on of a message and an exchange of ideas, among others. The following are examples of communication situations. A teacher delivering a lecture to her students, just like what I'm doing right now. A coach talking to his players, a dad giving advice to his son, and a salesperson giving a sales pitch to clients. The process of communication can be explained through the various models of communication constructed by experts throughout the years. The first model is the linear model. This model shows a straight path of relaying information. It is one-directional, which means that information from a sender is conveyed directly to the receiver. Consider a speaker delivering a speech in front of an audience. The speaker is the sender, and he or she conveys his or her message directly to the audience, which are the receivers of the message. The concept of a straight path of relaying information was first proposed by Aristotle and later on expounded by various scientists and communication experts. Eventually, Claude Shannon, a mathematician and electronic engineer, and Warren Weaver, a scientist and mathematician, introduced an important concept in this model: noise or barriers to effective communication. Shannon and Weaver explained that noise makes the sending of the message difficult. Later on, communications professor and author David Berlow modified the linear model by identifying 4 key elements: the source or sender, the message, the channel, and the receiver. Source. The source or sender is the origin of the message. He or she is influenced by 4 factors: knowledge, attitudes, communication skills, and the social-cultural system in which he or she belongs. Next, message. The message is an idea, thought, or piece of information that the sender aims to express or make known. It is comprised of the following: message content, which means what the message contains; elements, such as the language, gestures, facial expressions, and body movement used by the source or communicator to send his or her message. Next, the communicator's treatment of the message. This is how the sender delivers the message. Is it entertaining? Is it funny? Is it authoritative or firm? Structure of the message. It is the arrangement of the message for maximum effect depending on the goals of the sender. And lastly, code of the message. It is the form in which the message is sent. Say language, facial expressions or body language, dance, song, and many others. Channel. The channel is simply the means by which a message is sent. Examples are telephone and airwaves. Receiver. The receiver is the one who receives the message. The receiver's interpretation and reception of the message is influenced by the same four factors that influence the sender of the message: knowledge, attitudes, communication skills, and social-cultural system. Now, study the diagram shown. The sender sends a message through the channel to the receiver. However, the noise can affect the message when it is being transmitted through the channel. Mass media, especially TV and radio, are good examples of the linear model of communication. The message which comes from a broadcast travels through airwaves in a straight path going to the receiver, which is the person watching or listening. In this example, noise such as intermittent signals from the channel transmitting the airwaves will adversely affect the success of the transmission of the message. Next, we have the interactive model. This model takes into consideration feedback from the receiver. Thus, the message in this model originates from two sources: the message from the sender and the feedback from the receiver. When the receiver gives feedback, he or she becomes the sender, and the original sender becomes the receiver of the feedback. Your everyday conversations with friends are good examples of the interactive model. One gives a message, the other receives it, and then gives feedback accordingly. It is important to note that feedback may come in many forms. Aside from spoken words, feedback may be as simple as a nod of approval, a raised eyebrow, or even falling asleep during a lecture. Are you already sleepy? I hope not. Wilbur Schramm, an expert in mass communication, introduced the interactive model in 1954, which was groundbreaking at the time since it introduced the communicator's fields of experience. Schramm also took into account context. Context refers to the setting in which the communication situation takes place, while fields of experience refer to the cultural background and other frames of reference that an individual may bring into the interaction. Now, look at this interactive model. Communicators bring to the interaction their respective fields of experience. Their messages, as well as the way they send and interpret messages, are influenced by this field of experience. In order to communicate, the communicators' fields of experience must overlap, indicating knowledge and experiences that they have in common. The more they have in common, the more their fields of experience overlap. The bigger this overlapping field, the more easily they interact with each other. Naturally, the more they interact, the more they know about each other and the more shared experiences they have, the larger their shared field of experience. For instance, consider the following situation. You are asked by your teacher to pair off with a classmate and come up with a performance or project for the school program. In this instance, the context of the communication situation is a pair work for a school program. Given this context, you and your partner will exchange ideas on how to go about the given task. You talk, he or she reacts, and vice versa. The way you both talk and the ideas you share reflect your cultural background and the knowledge and experiences that the two of you already possess. Thus, the interactive model shows communication as a give-take-give interaction. Remember, give, take, give. You speak and your partner listens. In return, your partner speaks and you listen. The path, therefore, is no longer linear but circular. Next is the transactional model. This model, developed in the 1970s by Dean Barnland, shows communication as occurring continuously and simultaneously between or among people. According to Barnland, people do not simply send and receive messages and send them back again in that order. Instead, they send and receive messages simultaneously and build shared meanings during the interaction. Furthermore, the channel used, the environment, the communicators themselves, their shared meanings, and even noise are part of the message, not just elements involved in the communication process. In addition, noise in the transactional model is no more than just something taking place in the channel. Instead, noise is found or occurs at any part of or any point in the process. It could be found in the source, the encoding process, the channel, the decoding process, the receiver, the feedback, and many others. Look at the transactional model. Now, let's see what you have learned so far. Identify the element of communication being described. But before we proceed, let us first recall the three communication models. First is the linear model. This model simply shows a straight path of relaying information. It has four key elements such as the following: the source or sender, the message, the channel, and the receiver. Next is the interactive model. This model takes into consideration feedback from the receiver. It also deals with the context, which refers to the setting in which the communication situation takes place, and the fields of experience, which refers to the cultural background and other frames of reference that an individual may bring into the interaction. And lastly, the transactional model. This model shows communication as a two-way process in which participants are constantly sending and receiving messages. Now, I think you are all ready to identify the different elements of communication. Number 1. The source of the message. That's correct. It is the sender. Next, an example of this element is the telephone or the airwaves. That's right, channel. Number 3. Cultural background and knowledge you bring to the communication situation. Correct, fields of experience. Next, anything that serves as barrier to the successful relaying of a message. That's right, noise. Number 5, the setting in which communication takes place. Great, it is the context. And lastly, what do you call the receiver sends back to the source or the sender? That's right, it is the feedback. Great! Always remember, the sender is the source of the message. Examples of channel are the following: telephone and airwaves. Fields of experience is the cultural background and knowledge that you bring to the communication situation. Noise is anything that serves as barrier to the successful relaying of a message. Context is the setting in which communication takes place. And lastly, feedback is what the receiver sends back. Bear in mind that the biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply. That's all for today. I hope you learned something meaningful. Thank you for listening. Love and share Christ.
Hello, and thank you for selecting this virtual lecture. Today, I will be breaking down the three models of communication: the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. Let's get started. Before I explain how the communication models work, it is important for us to have a basic understanding of what communication is. Communication can be defined as the sending and receiving of messages to create shared meaning. The linear model was scholars' first attempt at explaining how this process works. It states, when communicating, a source will encode a message, or take an idea and give it meaning through words, and send it to a receiver through a channel, or the medium through which a message is delivered, such as a phone, computer, handwritten note, or even face-to-face. Once the message is sent, it is up to the receiver to decode or draw meaning from the message. It also recognizes that both physical and psychological noise play a large role in how we both encode and decode messages. While the linear model was an excellent start, scholars believed that this model was missing some very key elements. So, they created the interactive model of communication. Just like the linear model, the interactive model states that during communication, there is a source encoding a message, sending it through a channel, and a receiver that decodes the information. However, it also states, as the receiver is being sent a message, the receiver is also sending feedback to the source through their verbal and nonverbal responses to the message. Additionally, the interactive model recognizes that communication can be influenced by the environment, or the context in which communication is taking place. For a while, scholars were satisfied with the interactive model and its approach to how human communication functions, but they still felt as though something was missing. They sat down once again and created the transactional model of communication, which states that while all of the elements of the interactive model are true, there was one element that was absent: the fact that when communicating in the real world, each individual takes turns being both the source and the receiver. And sometimes we are both source and receiver simultaneously. In this video, we took a look at the three models of communication: the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. I hope this helped you to better understand how human communication works. Thank you again for selecting this virtual lecture.